And I will call the meeting of the Oversight Committee to order. It's now, what time is it? 9:03 a.m. Central Time. Due to the continued COVID-19 precautions and Governor Abbott's suspension of certain Open Meetings Act requirements, we are holding this meeting by video conference via Zoom. I want to thank staff, fellow members, presenters, and members of the public for their flexibility and understanding during this unique time. Before we start the agenda, I want to go over some important points for this meeting. If you're not speaking, please make sure that your microphone is on mute. Please leave your cameras on for the entire meeting. This is the easiest way for us to see that we are maintaining a quorum of members. In the unlikely event that our video conference technology fails completely, we have published a call-in number on the meeting notice that we will switch to for continuing the public meeting by teleconference. CPRIT has included a copy of the meeting notice with the call-in number at the beginning of the agenda packet. Finally, if an Oversight Committee member disconnects from the meeting and cannot reconnect, please contact Michael Fisher or Terry Simeon, and we will see what we can do to help you rejoin the meeting. I would like to move on to roll call. I know that I just asked you to mute yourselves, but for the roll call, make sure that your microphone is on. Dr. Cummings, will you proceed?
All right, I'll call roll. Ms. Payne.
Present.
Dr. Hernandez is in surgery. Mr. Margot.
Here.
Mr. Montgomery.
Here.
Dr. Patel.
Yeah.
Dr. Rice.
Here.
Dr. Rosenfeld.
Here.
We have a quorum.
All right. Our next agenda item is public comment. Public feedback is important because voters created CPRIT to help Texans. Starting our meetings with public comment underscores this board's commitment to transparency and accountability. Ms. Dole, has CPRIT received any requests to provide this public comment?
Yes, we've received 2 requests to address the Oversight Committee. The first person who will speak will be Mr. Dana Bacon. He's the Regional Director for Governmental Affairs with the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. After he concludes his remarks, Mindy Norris will speak. Ms. Norris is a board member for the American Lung Association.
Okay, let's proceed.
Dana, you are able to talk at this point.
Looks like it's muted.
There we go. My mouse wasn't responding well to click to accept unmute. Thank you. Good morning. My name is Dana Bacon. As mentioned, I serve as Regional Government Affairs Director for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society in Texas, and I'm also honored to help to coordinate the Texas Cancer Partnership's advocacy efforts for the good of the patients and communities we all serve. I'd like to thank you for CPRIT's contributions to longer and better lives in Texas. And I'm also thankful for the support the Texas voters gave to CPRIT last fall. And I'm additionally thankful for the support that legislative and executive leaders have given CPRIT, most recently in their May budget guidance to state administrators. We've already been talking about COVID. COVID-19 is posing tremendous medical and economic challenges to Texas, and it's causing particular disruptions in care for cancer patients who are finding it harder to access screening services and treatments right now. I'm pleased that CPRIT is helping Texas fight back and wanted to call attention to that. Just a week ago, CPRIT funded researchers at UT Health San Antonio and UT Austin announced separate discoveries about the COVID-19 virus that will help scientists who are working to develop antiviral drugs and vaccines. Between CPRIT's contributions there and the work it's already been doing and will continue to do against cancer, I'd like to say that its value to the state is greater than ever before. At the end of the day, for us, CPRIT's about the people it serves. I'd like to let the Oversight Committee know about a family I know in the Woodlands. Their son was born with Down syndrome. And when he was just 4 years old, he was diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia. Thanks to CPRIT research into the ties between these two conditions, this family and their son is receiving better care, greater hope, and he is now a teenager. remember he was diagnosed when he was just 4. Stories like these are one of many about survivorship that CPRIT's made possible. And I'd just like to thank you for your work and encourage us all to keep doing our parts to keep CPRIT strong and to keep these stories coming in 2020 and beyond. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our next speaker.
IT has informed me that Ms. Norris has not yet joined the call, so I'll have them confirm that she's not there. If she's not there, we'll just move on to the next agenda item.
That is confirmed.
Okay. The chair now recognizes Chief Operating Officer Heidi McConnell to present CPRIT's proposed legislative appropriations requests for the 2022-2023 biennium.
Good morning, members. I am going to share my screen, and while I'm doing that, I will continue to start the presentation. But just to highlight that we still have not received budget instructions from the Legislative Budget Board and Governor's Office regarding our budget. And so what we are presenting to you today is based on the instructions that we've had in prior biennia. So if there are any significant changes once the budget instructions are released to agencies, it might require some revamping of how we present our budget request. And we'll bring that back to you as necessary later on. But I'll proceed. So we have 4 basic items. We are requesting the full $300 million in general obligation bonds per year for each year of the next biennium. We do have 2 exceptional item requests to kind of move money within our budget. And we also have a rider transfer modification. And then there's the 10% increase to the Chief Scientific Officer exempt salary cap. And Wayne will actually address that towards the end of the presentation. So I'll move on to the exceptional items. That's the basic, what our budget looks like just as it is now. If we carry forward without the exceptional items, at $600 million for the biennium. The first item is to maintain level funding for grant review and award operations. This is really an adjustment to our budget in terms of an annual operations shortfall for ongoing grant review and award operating costs that include peer review, honoraria, grant revenue asset management, product development grant application, due diligence costs, as well as our outsourced pre and post award grant management support costs. And if you'll, for those members who have been on the Oversight Committee for a while, you'll recall every year we've made a request for probably the past 3 or 4 years to transfer money from our research grant budget line item to the grant review and award operations to cover these costs. So that total for the next biennium and the exceptional item is about $2.7 million per year. The second exceptional item is actually for 8 new staff members who kind of run the gamut from grant program compliance and then accounting support. So there would be 3 positions in accounting, 2 for actual new grant accountants, and they would focus on processing financial reports solely for the product development research grantees. We feel that based on internal staff conversations that it would be extremely helpful to have 2 dedicated grant accountants reviewing these financial reports, because the company grantees, it tends to be quite complicated, how their research and how their funding and how their companies operate. And so just having some specialized knowledge in that area would be very helpful. We also want to add one new accountant. We only have one staff accountant at this time, Michelle Huddleston, and so we would add a new position who would primarily support the grant payment processing, but would also provide some general support on general agency budget and accounting backup to Michelle Huddleston. The request also includes 3 new grant compliance specialists. We do have an increasing workload around grant compliance reviews, monitoring visits, and then trainings. We do have an active grant portfolio of 500 grants at any given time, which is about $1.4 billion. This would add to that compliance review. There are also 2 new program positions, one in academic research and one for product development research, to again address increasing programmatic workloads in both areas around RFA development, tracking the grant reporting, documentation, as well as data collection and analysis, and summarizing those grant results. So that cost for the personnel is a little over $600,000 in the first year and a little under $600,000 in the second year. And the difference is the equipment costs. So obviously in the first year, we would have to purchase additional computer equipment. That addresses that. Before I move on, are there any questions on either of the exceptional items? Okay.
Excuse me. Yeah, I had a question. Is this this is additional money that we would request the legislature appropriate, or is this just shifting what we can use the bond proceeds for?
That's a great question. It would just be shifting what we can use the bond proceeds for. So actually, this next slide demonstrates that. And in the packet under tab 1, if you look at 1-3, you'll see the 2022-23 requested column, and then there's 2 columns to the right, which are called the 2022-23 adjusted for exceptional items. So it shows the shift there. And so where, for example, the total of the 2 exceptional items are about $3.3 million. That money comes from grant awards. So, and 90%, because of the split between research and prevention, 90% comes from the research line item and 10% comes from the prevention grant award line item. So you'll see that if we did nothing else differently, that would be the research grant line item would be up $251 million, and the prevention grant award line item would be about $28 million, and that goes down with both exceptional items to be $248 million and a little under $28 million for prevention. So,
you know, if you're on page 1-3, Ms. McConnell, in our book, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind, the titles of the various things are lapsed research grant award, lapsed prevention grants, lapsed. If those are funds we didn't spend because of the onset of the virus, I think, are they lost? In other words, we don't spend that money in a year, is it gone forever?
No, because of the nature of the bonds and they can only be appropriated to CPRIT, they do not go away. And the lapses are from FY 2019, not for the current year. So they are, when we may have some reported later for 2020, but really it has to do with when we make our grant awards, and this happens pretty regularly, that, in research, they make as much as they can, but then we do have, especially on the recruitment side, grant awards declined. And so that impacts that lapse.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
ID Craig here. 2 quick questions.
Mm-hmm.
On the first item, you mentioned it's 2.7 million, which I thought was due to more expenses for review of companies and academic grants.
That's correct.
And I was wondering how there could be more when this year we're requesting more when this year we're having less review cycles.
Well, so still, for example, and this was approved this the last meeting in May. For example, the outsourced pre and post award grant management support costs, which are with our current contractor, GDIT, that budget came in for for 2021, even with a single major grant award cycle at almost close to $10 million, or just under $10 million. And that's up from where we had historically been at about 7.9. So that's the difference for this upcoming year, and has been a similar difference like from 2019 into 2020 and even 2 years prior. The Review Council honoraria, there was an increase made in the honoraria policy last year or for 2020. And so we have to carry that forward. You know, the review councils are still going to be performing significant work. And then we also want to have grant revenue asset management with this Texas Safekeeping Trust Company, and those costs are incorporated. And so, and then even on due diligence, our costs, while next year may not be quite as high as it has been in the past, like for this year, we were at an estimated budget of about a little over $400,000 for the business due diligence with our ICON contractor. Next year it'll be about 350,000 or so is the projection on that contract. But going forward, and this actually goes to the following year, these exceptional items for the following biennium, there's an estimate that will be in the $500,000 range based on just the throughput of those grants coming through peer review towards due diligence.
Oh, so it will cost more this year for one review cycles than say like 3 review cycles in previous years?
Well, it's not going to, so it will cost a similar amount, because even though with a major, one major review cycle, and we have pulled out the like cost for hotels where, you know, in-person peer review meetings were occurring, and we are projecting that everything will go towards video conferencing. We do have significant enhancement costs and development costs with the grant management system and even the peer review system. We're putting in additional security, and those costs have to be maintained in within that contract and support. So there is some balance.
Yeah. This is Wayne. If I can slip in here, there is a movement of funds. There are some reductions in some areas, but other aspects of it are going up regardless. I also will take this opportunity to point out that even though we are doing one cycle, if you will, in 2021, along with the continuous recruitment cycle, we project that there will be no reduction in the amount of dollar awards made. We expect to be able to use our full allotment, and it's just going to be spread out differently over the course of the year.
Thank you, Wayne. And one other quick question, Heidi. After these additional, after these exceptions, do you have an estimate what CPRIT's overhead costs will be? In other words, what % of the grant money goes directly for grants and product development as opposed to overhead costs at CPRIT?
That's a great question, and I have not done that calculation, but I can do it, and I can get through this and follow up at the end of the presentation, if that works for you.
I'll again, if I could again insert myself here. The overhead for the agency, if you calculate it using just what is in the General Appropriations Act for operations and indirect cost, which would be the maximum amount of overhead, historically we have run 6.3%, which is extraordinarily good. However, if you add to that the whatever it is, the 500 or so grants that are under continuous review, which total some $1.4 billion, our administration costs are a little over 1%, 1.2, 1.3%. And Dr. Rosenfeld, there gets to be a point where it's difficult to promote or brag about the administrative cost being so low to where it's now entered a range where I don't think it's sufficient to safeguard the assets that the state has invested in, and that these personnel that we are asking are critical to making sure that the monies are spent appropriately as the legislature intends. Heidi, you know, but there will be a change in that Heidi will calculate as a result of these additional 8 FTE, but I do not expect it to be a significant increase to that percent.
Thank
Yeah,
you. And Heidi, you don't have to do it by the end of the meeting, just when you have it.
Actually, I do have it. It will be, of our appropriations, it'll be a total of 6.8%.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Are you finished, Heidi?
No, I'll keep moving forward.
Go ahead.
Okay. So the third item is a rider modification, and this is the rider that requires us currently to request permission to transfer money from our grant line items, budget line items, to any of our operating budget line items. We're, as far as we know, we're the only agency that has to do this. There is a general provision in the General Appropriations Act that allows agencies to transfer 20% among their budget line items. So this modification is to allow us to just notify the Legislative Budget Board that all of the appropriations, you know, when we make appropriations transfers, rather than having to ask for permission and wait for them to respond, which can take 2 to 3 months. So it just puts an administrative burden on us that, you know, we feel would be better spent just, you know, moving forward. But we've asked for this before, it hasn't been granted, so, but we'll want to try again. So this next item Wayne will cover.
Yes, and I'll do this quickly. The Chief Scientific Officer salary is an exempt position. The only 2 exempt positions our agency has is mine and the Chief Scientific Officer. The reason for the exempt positions is they fall outside of the state classification schedule. Everybody else on staff is in the state auditor's classification schedule. These salaries can only be adjusted, the authority can only be adjusted by legislative appropriation action. Once the authority is set in the appropriations bill, it is up to the Oversight Committee, in our case, to determine if it wants to provide the full amount that is authorized. It cannot give somebody a salary increase above what is in that exempt salary. In this particular case, The chief scientific officer position is exempt because there are no other positions like this in Texas state government. Clearly, there are comparable positions at institutions of higher education. And when in 2013, when some adjustments were being made to our appropriations and how we conducted business, this salary cap, this exempt salary was set at the 553,500 figure. That amount was derived using several comparable positions at health-related institutions across the state at that time. Since 2013, clearly this salary is no longer competitive with those positions. This position needs to be someone of the same stature as a health science center administrator with deep knowledge of cancer research and activities. I have done some research to come up with comparable positions and just very quickly what those are. Is the director of the Simmons Cancer Center at Southwestern, the chief scientific officer at MD Anderson, the cancer research division head at Anderson, the director of the Livestrong Cancer Center, and the dean of school and provost at Texas Tech Health Sciences Center. I will say that the 10% increase that I request authority to ask of the legislature still does not meet that comparable level. But given the budget climate that we have and the legislature's history in granting exempt salary increases, 10% seemed like a reasonable amount to request. Therefore, I'm asking for the Oversight Committee's approval to make this request of the legislature.
So that concludes the presentation on the legislative appropriations request for the 2022-23 biennium.
Are there any questions for Ms. McConnell? Okay, hearing none. Members, as Ms. McConnell has explained, we are voting on the substance of CPRIT's proposed request because the agency has not yet received instructions from the governor's office and the legislative budget board for filing the request. If the Oversight Committee is unable to meet before CPRIT must submit its appropriations request, the Audit Subcommittee will convene to review the final draft and confirm that it is consistent with what Ms. McConnell presented today. Do I have a motion to approve CPRIT's proposed legislative appropriations request for the 2022-23 biennium, subject to final review by the Audit Committee if necessary?
So moved.
Right, I hear that. Moved by Dr. Rye, seconded by Mr. Montgomery. All in favor, vote aye.
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 Any opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries. Excuse me?
I vote nay.
Vote nay. All right. We have one nay.
Who was that, please?
Dr. Cummings.
Thank you.
The chair now recognizes Chief Scientific Officer Jim Wilson to present the proposed FY21 Academic Research Program RFAs and timelines.
Thank you. Dr. Moore is going to present a PowerPoint that will help me organize this presentation and hopefully provide you with key information about 6 RFAs that are being recommended for your consideration in the next fiscal year. Can I just check, is my audio coming through satisfactorily?
Yes.
Thank you. So the first 3 that I'm going to discuss are well known to the Oversight Committee members who have been on the committee for the past several years. And then 3 will be new awards that I'll spend additional time to go through the background. The first established RFA is the Core Facility Research Award. Recall that this is has a goal of enhancing or establishing facilities that support cancer research across a very broad group of subject matters. Institutions of higher learning are eligible and able to submit up to 2 applications, provided that one of those applications supports exclusively childhood cancer research. The award is now recommended for $4 million over a period of 5 years. And just a brief comment on impact. To date, there have been 51 core facility research awards supported by CPRIT to 19 different institutions across the state. And the follow-on funds represent, if you will, a surrogate for impact on cancer research. Those are now upwards of $380 million. The second is the High Impact, High Risk Research Award. Recall that this is an award that provides short-term funding for investigators to explore feasibility of high-risk or new projects. One of the goals of this award is to bring individuals who are interested in bringing their science into cancer-relevant research. And the award is for $250,000 over a 2-year period. To date, there have been 165 such awards to 28 different Texas institutions. And notably that 28% within a short period of time led to new research awards that are now totaling $40 million. And we were never quite sure what the success rate of these high-risk projects should be, but I think all of us in the research community are impressed by the impact of these relatively limited funding to bring new investigators into cancer research and to stimulate new cancer research funding in Texas. Next slide, Patty, if you would, is the Early Clinical Investigator Research Award. Recall that we inaugurated this RFA last year with the intent of providing physicians who are early in their academic career opportunity to develop clinical research skills and to become, if you will, trained clinical investigators. The motivation for this award was a recognition that our recruitment awards were having an outstanding impact on lab, prevention, and physician scientist recruitments into Texas. But frankly, the clinical investigator corps was not represented, and for a myriad of reasons. Many of those relate to limitations in the availability of support at academic institutions for clinicians to spend time invested in cancer investigations, trials, and in fact, the limited background that many of the fellowship programs were providing. So this is an attempt to mitigate those issues. And our first experience with this RFA, you'll hear about next month, was quite positive, and we want to bring it back with eligibility for academic institutions to nominate 2 applicants for, this is a 1.5 5-year award. The components of this award are salary support to protect time of the individuals, allow them to pursue didactic studies to enhance their skills, important mentorship criteria, and then requirement to initiate clinical trial by the midpoint of the award. And of course, as I stated, the impact is a desired increase in the pool of clinical investigators that would help to translate discoveries quickly to trials that would be available to patients. I'm going to now go through 3 new awards and invite you to stop me if there are questions or comments along the way. The first is the Clinical Trials Network Award. This was a recommendation from the Clinical Trials Advisory Committee that Wayne Roberts asked us to convene a couple of years ago to advise CPRIT on strategies to increase availability of clinical trials in Texas. And the recommendation is to institute an award that has a series of stages that are intended to initiate this process with a deliberate strategy to build on the clinical trial expertise of cancer centers and cancer treatment organizations that are sponsoring clinical trials, and to provide funds that would allow them to extend that expertise and infrastructure to what we'll call network affiliates. And the strategy would be to make an award to a lead institution, that is a institution that is sponsoring clinical trials and has a active infrastructure, know-how, et cetera, to provide the expertise, the access to trials, the IRB, the data management and toxicity monitoring that's required, and to establish that relationship in the first stage with 2 network affiliates that would be located at oncology care facilities currently that have limited access to clinical trials, and have identified a physician champion and some of the sort of fundamental components that were required for initiating clinical trial access. And when proven that this infrastructure is working, the lead institution can then move on to apply for additional funds that would allow them to extend this paradigm to 2 additional network affiliates that are essentially outside their current network area, and thereby build an experience that would hopefully over time provide a number of hub and spoke initiatives across Texas that would begin to increase both the access to clinical trials, but also teach us what are the successful mechanisms for doing this efficiently and effectively, and thereby build on our cancer research expertise at the major hubs. The next RFA is a new RFA as well. This is motivated by the recognition that a major barrier to participation in clinical trials are the non-clinical out-of-pocket costs that are incurred, and by a number of demonstration projects across the country have proven to be when there is a modest amount of funds provided to individuals who are traveling for clinical trial access, requiring overnight stays and the like, that it improves the access or their willingness and ability to participate in a clinical trial. This particular mechanism is enabled by new legislation that was passed in the last biennium, sponsored by Representative Parker, and is an award of $1.5 million over 3 years. The requirements would be an institution, organization, or physician group that conduct clinical research and have identified a potential opportunity to make an impact by supplementing these expenses, and then a strategy for how to identify the individuals and link them with an effective reimbursement plan. The actual reimbursements are relatively modest in comparison, but as I mentioned, in terms of previous experience, appear to make a significant difference on access or ability to participate in trials, and as well as issues such as financial stress. And then the final new academic research RFA is we've named it the Texas Regional Excellence in Cancer, or TREC Award. This award has been motivated by the recognition that regions of Texas, institutions in regions of Texas that have historically received low levels of peer-reviewed cancer research funding have over the last several years made commitments to building their cancer research enterprise. And it is the intent of this award for CPRIT to partner with those institutions and with a goal of strengthening their ability to accrue cancer research grants from CPRIT, from the NIH, et cetera. And the eligibility is defined as Texas institutions with campuses that are located greater than 100 miles from current NCI designated cancer centers, which are located in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, the Houston Metroplex, and San Antonio. The award is for $6 million over 5 years, so it's a significant commitment of CPRIT to these developing programs. It would require the identification of an established investigator to lead the program with an identified theme that's relevant to the cancer problems in that region. 3 to 5 research projects would be supported, the majority of which would be led by junior faculty. There would be opportunities for recruitment of junior faculty, support for new shared resources, and then opportunities to fund support partnerships with established Texas cancer programs, that is cancer research centers, say in Houston, Dallas, San Antonio, et cetera, that would provide opportunities for mentorship and access to facilities or expertise or the like. And I would then comment that this has been in development for the last year and a half or so, with a significant amount of input from the University Advisory Committee, from the different institutions across the state, and I think has been well received as an opportunity that resonates with their aspirations to build the components of cancer research necessary to actually have that critical mass to compete for NCI funding, CPRIT awards, and the like. I'll also add that it's modeled heavily after an NIH program that had similar aspirations to build research expertise in states that had traditionally had limited or low levels of NIH funding. States, South Carolina, Oklahoma, Kansas, examples. And I would also add quickly that all 3 of those states leverage similar opportunities to build NCI designated cancer centers in the states over the last decade. So while the NIH program is not specifically cancer research focused, just a comment to say that this model has proven successful nationally, and by focusing it in Texas, we're hoping that it would have a similar impact.
Dr. Wilson, I have a question real quick on that. Does that Texas Regional Excellence in Cancer can you deal with the core facility support awards at the same time? Can you be eligible for both?
Yeah, there is no restriction on regarding that aspect. In fact, one would hope that the efforts for recruitment grants, other core facility grants, high impact, high risk awards would also go on and resonate with this effort as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. The next slide is just a summary of these 6 RFAs that I've mentioned, and I'll bring those to you for further questions or considerations. The timeline for these, with your approval, we would publish these RFAs next week. Applications would be received through the end of January, and you would hear the results of our peer review process in August of next year.
Okay, are there any questions for Dr. Wilson?
Yeah, Dee's Craig Rosenfeld, some questions for Jim. Well,
Go ahead.
first, good morning, Jim. How are you?
Well, thank you.
Yeah, a few questions. You know, we've talked about this network award on several occasions, and I just haven't been convinced this is a good expenditure of money. I see it as highly redundant with the current NCI federal programs. And also, it seems like to me what it's paying for is for a center to develop a referral pattern and more patients and income. And I'm just not sure we should go there. I think a better expenditure is our traditional way of funding research grants. So I would be very hesitant to support the clinical trials network. I've heard this presented multiple times, and like I said, just haven't been convinced that it's necessary or a good expenditure of money. Second, on the participation award, does that money go directly to patients to pay for hotel fees or travel fees, or where does the money go?
So if I may answer the second question first, the mechanism for reimbursement would be based on identifying individuals who have financial need, and those individuals who are traveling for the purposes of participating in the clinical trial. It could be across town, could be across state, would have their travel cost and accommodation cost, meals, and et cetera paid, and they would submit to the grant sponsor or the grantee the receipts for those and be reimbursed for those directly.
I got it. And the Texas Regional Excellence in Care, is that open to any practice in the state? Whether it's owned by a hospital, a private group, a university, a corporation?
No, this is specifically limited to institutions of higher learning, academic institutions, if you will, located with campuses that are located greater than 100 miles from NCI designated cancer centers.
Could you give me a couple examples? I'm just not sure what you're referring to.
Sure. UT Tyler.
Okay.
UT Regional, Rio Grande Valley, Texas Tech El Paso, UTEP,
Okay.
Lubbock, Texas Tech Health Science Center, Lubbock, College Station in Texas A&M.
Very good.
Baylor University.
And my final question is on many occasions at the Oversight Committee and in other committee meetings, we've talked extensively about increasing the percent of spend that goes to product development. And here we're seeing millions of dollars of new spending, not related to the product development committee, which has been brought up not only internally, but by our product development, not the review committee, the advisory committee. And I'm not sure that these are, these additional spending is in direct opposition to the recommendation that we spend a larger proportion of money on product development. So just to sum up, I don't want to monopolize the conversation. is I could support these new initiatives, except I cannot support the Clinical Trials Network Award. And I'd like to know what the impact is on percent spend on product development.
So I'll take the last first. The academic research program projects that these RFAs and the RFAs that you've already approved for next year, the recruitment awards and the research training awards, would account for about 75% of the funds that would be that you saw from Mr. Roberts' plan for the next 2 years, biennium, toward what he calls research, which combines both the academic research and product development. So it's 75% of that. It could be less if those allocations change, and that would be determined by peer review and funding, funding decisions that would come to you as members of the Oversight Committee in August. I am not going to comment on the points that you raised regarding opinions about how much secret funds would be allocated to research programs or product development, because I'll leave that to future discussions by the Oversight Committee. But I have not heard that as a universal opinion. And then second, I'd say that to my knowledge,
Dr. Rice?
I'm sorry, Jim, did you finish your comments?
I have not. I was going to say that, I was going to say you can check with my colleague, Cindy Walker-Peach, but it's my understanding that all product development recommendations from their council have been supported by CPRIT. And so I don't know that there's been any evidence of infringement. I guess I can actually discuss the importance of the Clinical Trials Network and invite other members of this board to, I think, counter which is just absolutely incorrect assumptions that were made regarding the impact of the NIH national effort to extend clinical trials. It's just clear that the clinical trials access in Texas is limited to a select group of institutions, and they're mostly urban-based, and as a consequence, real risk of limiting the access of patients.
I'd be happy to comment. I don't know how we do the order of speakers, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, but I actually need to finish, if I may.
Yeah.
In response, and then second, the second aspect of this is that
Jim, I think your line is. Are you all seeing him freezing?
Yeah, his has a tendency to break up.
Try that again, Jim. I think we lost it, the second one.
Well, I was just going to finish by saying that one of the real intents of this effort is to build access for clinical research to participate in the pipeline of our discoveries. So the focus is on phase 2 trials that would be coming from our Texas cancer centers, and to getting those in greater access and hopefully completed in a more timely manner. So I guess I would say that our Clinical Trials Network, our Clinical Trials Advisory Committee, has a completely different opinion about the importance of this effort than were expressed by Dr. Rosenfeld. And second, it is I think, an attempt to do this initiative with some deliberate care so that we don't invest large amounts of CPRIT funds in something that's not effective. And I'll leave it there.
Dr. Rice, did you finish your question?
No, I was just going to echo, I think, Jim, and again, we've had this conversation a little bit, but I think Cindy Walker-Peach will tell us that actually there's not been any record of a product development award not granted because of some limitation. That seems like the balance is the limit of applications that are successful on the product development side. And so I just make that comment that I think Cindy would probably support.
Mr. Chairman, if I could.
Mr. Montgomery?
Yes, I want to follow up on Dr. Rosenfeld and Dr. Wilson's comments. I support this energetically and enthusiastically, these 3 new programs, because I see them as really branching out and digging into places that have a great need. The outlying areas of Texas, the rural communities, the institutions that have not traditionally had the most funding. We've made grants close to $1 billion to MD Anderson and UT Southwestern. But as Mr. Margot has pointed out more than once, institutions in El Paso or Lubbock or Amarillo or Tyler also have great facilities and need our grant making capabilities as well. In particular, I want to respond to the Clinical Trials Network point, because the Product Development Advisory Committee recommended one standard for success for CPRIT, and they've done it year after year after year. Every single report they've given us recommends that our standard for success be the number of patients in clinical trials. These awards would directly address that and help fulfill the standard that the Product Development Advisory Committee themselves has put forward to us. That's all. Thank you.
Dr. Cummings, did you have a question? You're muted. There.
Yes, I got it. Thank you. Actually, I have 2 questions and 2 comments, if I may. First, quickly for Dr. Wilson on the clinical trials participation program. A lot of outlying cancer centers who have to send patients for clinical trials have programs to try and assist with barriers to patients getting to those facilities, such as travel and so forth. And we have a fund here at Shannon and San Angelo to help patients do that. My question for this new RFA is, how much of the 1.5 of the award do you anticipate will go directly to patients?
Yes, so as part of the RFA, a requirement is spending 2/3 of those funds directly to patients. The rest would be in terms of coordinating
Sure.
access to the.
And with our fund that we use here, part of, I'm going to use the term bylaws of the program, is that there are limitations per patient or a yearly max of what a patient can access. And so is that going to be something that each individual awardee would evaluate, or is there a standard that we are setting that is going to try to make sure that funds are not inordinately dispersed?
Yes, so so the applicants will set their standard under guidelines that are provided in the RFA based on the financial need as determined by poverty level assessments, number of members of family, and other considerations. So, so there are guidelines, but they will be administered by the applicants.
Okay, I would encourage that, because distances, geographic isolation, and so forth are different across the state, and there may be reason that those thresholds should be different. So those are my comments on that one. And then just to add to other comments on the Clinical Trials Network Award, I've you and I have had conversations about this, and I've had my questions as well. Practicing day-to-day oncology in a geographically isolated area, I can attest to the need and the dire need for a mechanism to help get non-metro participation in clinical trials in general. So I think this is a good place to start, and I appreciate your comments of trying to start out in perhaps baby steps to see what works, and we're probably going to learn a lot from this RFA that may lead to tweaking or a different process in the future. But this is something that is a real issue, and it's I think we have perhaps led to an unexpected bias in some of our clinical trial results because of the homogeneous participation by patients who live in an area that is offering these clinical trials. And I think this is a way to try and make sure that we are evaluating the entirety of our population in a particular clinical trial and what we're trying to achieve. So I am in support of all three of these. Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
Mr.
Dr.
Margo,
Hernandez? Dr. Hernandez, do you have a question? You're muted if you do.
Okay, can you hear me, Chairman?
Yes.
Perfect. Good morning, everybody. I apologize, first of all, for being late. I got caught up in some emergency procedures, but I want to thank the staff and Dr. Wilson and Dr. Peach for all the hard work they've done. I've read through all the research, and I'm in full support with my colleagues of all the programs, RFAs that are being put forward, and I agree that it's time we treat all Texans the same, and then we reach out to them across and get them involved and get them into all trials. So I just want to compliment the staff for that. Thank you.
Mr. Margo, could I make a comment?
Yes.
I've got a couple of points with respect to Dr. Rosenfeld's comments. First of all, on the terms of the need of the clinical trials, I identified this as a priority for the agency as far back as 2013 when I began to hear comments about there are no CPRIT developed drugs out on the market at this point in time. And of course, as all of us know, it takes 15 to 18 years for an idea to leave the bench and to get to the bedside. But in lieu of that, a really good proxy measure has been, and it has resonated with the legislature, is the number of clinical trials, CPRIT funded clinical trials using pharmaceuticals developed by CPRIT. We've got some 146 out there. Off the top of my head, I think we've got around 26,000 participants in these clinical trials. And it sort of also reflects a criticism out in California with the California Institute of Regenerative Medicine, which is also trying to get reauthorized this year, is only about 25% of the amount of clinical trials that we've supported, and they have been criticized for not having a sufficient number of clinical trials. Therefore, this was why I asked Dr. Wilson to work with his advisory committees to find a way to step up the clinical trials. With respect to the product development funding ratio, yes, the Oversight Committee a number of years ago expressed a desire that we fund a greater amount of our annual appropriations to product development. That has been a goal of your staff and the board ever since, but there has been an insufficient number of applications that can get through our peer review process. And as a result, monies that are sort of softly earmarked for product development have shifted over at the end of a fiscal year in order to fund the oversubscription, if you will, of coming out of academic research. That actually raises an interesting policy point. If we do not hit our target for product development at the board's direction, we could not transfer those monies to academic research and hold them in reserve to the point in time when we do have additional product development applications that can get funded. In closing, I will say that one of the new positions that you have authorized us to request of the upcoming legislative session is in product development to help Dr. Cindy Walker-Peach drum up additional applications for product development. So some of the actions you're discussing today are interlocked to that point. Thank you, Mr. Margo.
Any other questions? Okay, I want to compliment Dr. Wilson on the Texas Regional Excellence in Cancer Award. That is something, I think, as you heard from Dr. Cummings and others, that's critical for the rest of Texas. Thank you. Members, I will entertain a motion approving the proposed FY 2021 Academic Research Program RFAs as presented by Dr. Wilson.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Montgomery and seconded by who?
Rice.
Dr. Patel. All in favor vote aye.
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 Any opposed?
I have a motion. Could we vote separately on the Clinical Trial Network Award versus the others?
Kristen?
Yes, we can separate out the Clinical Trials Network RFA.
All right, so this motion will be for all of the items other than the clinical trials RFA? Is that correct?
Yes.
Then I would make
So
that
moved.
Okay,
Second.
all right. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, vote aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, let's take the second item. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
second.
Okay, all in favor, vote aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay.
Okay. Motion carries. The chair recognizes Product Development Officer Cindy Walker-Peach to present the FY 2021 Product Development Program RFAs and proposed timeline.
Well, welcome everybody. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, members. Thank you for your time. This will be short. You can relax. You may recall that the Oversight Committee previously approved 3 of the product development RFAs during the February 2020 OC meeting. These included the Texas company, the relocation company, and the seed company award mechanisms, the 3 that we offer right currently in product development. You will find the descriptions of the previously approved RFAs as well as the associated timelines in today's meeting packet after tab 3. So there is no action item. This is more of a notice. In a nutshell, we plan to offer the next set of 3 RFAs starting in December 2nd, and we'll, along with the academic research, bring those award recommendations to you during the August 2021 Oversight Committee. And I'm happy to address any questions at this point.
Any questions? Okay. The chair now recognizes Prevention Officer Ramona Majid to present the FY 2021 Prevention Program RFAs and proposed timeline.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, members. As Cindy said, you approved the prevention RFAs also previously. There will be in FY 2021 4 RFAs will be released. You can find these behind tab 4 in your booklet, and below the mechanism descriptions is the proposed timeline. And there's no action item at this point. This is informational. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Ramona? The chair now recognizes Chief Executive Officer Wayne Roberts to present the revised project timeline for FY 2022 program priorities and the CPRIT 2.0 plan.
Thank you, Mr. Margot. And there is no action today required on your part. This is in here to serve notice that as we've waded through COVID-19 up to this point, we've decided that we need to find a way to move forward on the discussion of the statutorily required adoption of the 2022 program priorities, and then to pick back up the discussions on CPRIT 2.0, where we go from here with the authority given to us by Proposition 6. You will be, within the next 2 weeks, I believe, at your program subcommittees beginning the discussions on the 2022 priorities. We've got to get those in place in November in order to start informing the development of RFAs for fiscal year 2022. So we need to move that along. The timeline for the CPRIT 2.0 planning is not as aggressive as we had first adopted back in February. A reason for this is part of what we need is good input from the legislative community, and I just don't think they're in a position right now with the election, with COVID-19, and wondering how they're going to operate in January to really provide us with appropriate level of input. We also don't see an enormous amount of pressure to rush through this project. It needs to be done deliberately. We need to make sure that we can find a way, probably using video conference meetings, in order to really get appropriate feedback from the public and the substantive experts out there. So the timelines of these are behind my memo in the meeting book. I'll be happy to try and respond to any questions that you've got. If not, we can move along.
Are there any questions for Mr. Roberts? Seeing or hearing, oh, Mr. Montgomery.
Yeah, just briefly, Mr. Roberts, I presume that on page 5.2, we get to May 20, and the next page we get to July 31st. We're still in 2020 at that point, right? And we switched to 2021 at, yeah, okay. I think I've answered my own question.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, yes.
Yeah, it's a little confusing because it's 2022 program priorities, but I wasn't clear on the year for those, but I think I got it. Thank you. Sorry.
I will make no comment about attorneys and math. Chair recognizes Mr. Roberts to provide an update regarding CPRIT's next Oversight Committee meeting on August 19th.
Again, I'll be very brief on this one. I just want to remind the members that historically August is an extremely packed and busy meeting, so please allow upwards to 4 to 5 hours for this meeting. We will have a large number of award recommendations to make from all 3 of the programs. In addition to that, we have a number of year-end contractual approvals we need to get from you. Honoraria policy will need to be adopted, among other things. So anticipate not only a full agenda, full day on August 19th, but quite probably more time with each of the substantive subcommittees. And that's all I've got on that, Mr. Margot.
Okay, if there are no questions of Mr. Roberts.
Wayne, just quick, Wayne, will August definitely be a virtual meeting?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. And actually to that point, most likely the November meeting, we are still operating under the governor's executive order that authorizes us to do this. And until we're told to change, we will continue in this format. And I, of course, will let you know immediately if there is a change in this format. But I think it's not just CPRIT is benefiting from the ability to do this, but all state agencies. And I think you're going to see a lot of legislative activities done this way as well.
Okay, at this time, the Oversight Committee will move into closed session to take up agenda item number 10. We will go into closed session pursuant to Texas Open Meetings Act 551.071 to discuss and receive advice from counsel. The Oversight Committee members will leave the Zoom call and reconvene on a separate call in closed session. Once the Oversight Committee has concluded the closed session, we will rejoin the open meeting on Zoom. The open meeting Zoom call will remain publicly available while we are in closed session. The following CPRIT staff shall join the Oversight Committee in the closed session: Mr. Roberts, Ms. Doyle, and Dr. Walker Peach. The time is now presently 10:18 Central Time. Okay, the board now reconvenes in open session. The time is 10:30 a.m. Central Time. If there is no further business, the chair moves to adjourn this meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 The motion carries. The meeting stands adjourned at 10:31 a.m. Friday, July the 31st. Thank you.
Be safe, people.
Thank you.
Thank you.